Hello there, you beautiful people. My name is Willow, and welcome to my second Skyrim challenge run. My last run in Fallout 4 as a child of Adam was super fun, so today we're gonna take on something absolutely brutal while we find out if I can beat Skyrim's legendary survival difficulty with only unarmed damage. Before we get into the run, let's lay down some ground rules. I can only use unarmed damage against enemies. I must play the entire game on the survival difficulty. I can't use any bugs or glitches on purpose to exploit the game. I can only use visual mods with the exception of the Insects Be Gone mod, and I cannot use console commands for anything but fixing bugs. So this run is pretty simple, but I expect it to be one of, if not the, hardest run I've attempted so far. I'm excited and terrified of what awaits me in the big wide world of Tamriel, but before we jump into the gameplay, let's analyze the run itself. I write the script for this run as I go, and all of this part has been written prior to beginning the run. If you want to skip my pre-run thoughts and get right into the gameplay, go to the time code on screen now. With them gone, let's dump some info. So this run is going to be incredibly difficult. For starters, I am playing on the legendary difficulty, which means that I only deal 25% of the damage I would on the adept difficulty, while taking 300% of the damage I would on that difficulty as well. That already puts me at a massive disadvantage in general with combat, but on top of that, I'm going to be playing on survival mode, which removes fast travel, adds hunger and thirst requirements, as well as the most brutal cold mechanic I've seen in a game. And that's not even looking at how bad Unarmed is in Skyrim, so let's do that. Unlike the Fallout games and the earlier Elder Scrolls games, there's not really a perk or skill tree based around punching people. This means that our damage isn't going to scale very much, if at all. With that being said, there are a few ways to increase our damage. We'll start off with the only perk in the game related to unarmed damage, and it's in the heavy armor tree, and it's called Fists of Steel. It increases our unarmed damage based on which tier of heavy gloves we're using, and that's pretty much it as far as skills are concerned. Other than skills, there is an enchantment that boosts unarmed damage, and it can be found in the Rift in Ratways, and it's called the Gloves of the Pugilist. These are going to be very important to get early on, so I can disenchant them and get my enchanting level up to have a little bit more damage than they would give me, because they only give me 10 more unarmed damage. I'm also playing on the Anniversary Edition of Skyrim, which gives a ton of Creation Club content, one of which is called the Brawler's Gauntlets, which adds a set of gauntlets to each type of armor in the game that come with the unarmed enchantment if sold by a merchant. This may be a good way to get around leveling enchanting, as each higher tier of armor has more unarmed damage. This may be a good way to get around having to level enchanting to increase our damage. But that's enough talking about gear, let's talk about character creation, where I found out that not all unarmed attacks are equal. We can have 3 different base damage numbers for our unarmed attacks, which are 4, 10, or 22, depending on which race we choose. All of the human-like races, such as Nords, Redguards, and Orcs, all have 4 base damage. The Argonians have a base damage of 10, and for some reason Khajiit have a base damage of 22 despite both Argonians and Khajiit having claws. Either way, I was thinking about whether or not I'd allow myself to use Khajiit or not, as it's obviously the best choice, and decided to create a community poll, and you all overwhelmingly said I can use any race I want, so I'm definitely going with Khajiit as it makes the most sense for damage. Leave a comment down below if you think I can beat this run. I'm really unsure if I'm going to be able to, but that's enough talk, let's get right into the gameplay. I start off the game in the back of a carriage with a bunch of prisoners who will not stop talking. They explain that I've been captured alongside them by the Imperials, a group of people who wear red and kind of rule the world, but kind of not. Either way, it turns out that Skyrim, the continent that we are currently in, is rebelling against the Empire, and we just so happen to get caught in an Imperial trap along with a bunch of blue guys who are called the Stormcloaks, and they're doing the rebelling. And wouldn't you know it, one of the people in the cart with me is the leader of the Stormcloaks. Anyways, this is all leading to the fact that we're about to be executed for treason alongside them despite having nothing to do with them. So, you know, a regular Tuesday or something like that. Eventually, our band of red and blue people reach a town called Helgen, and I'm shuffled off this cart towards my execution. After they call out some other names, they realize that I'm not on the execution list, and instead of being reasonable and figuring out who I am, they decide to just execute me anyways because they're the Legion. A man named Hadvar asks me who I am, and I proceed to morph into a crappy version of Tony the Tiger because the Khajiit race is great. I then give our rip-off cereal mascot the most fitting name before watching a man so eager to be executed he couldn't wait for the priestess to give him his last rites. Now it's my turn to be executed, and I slowly meander my way to the chopping block, and right before the executioner is going to remove my head from my body, a dragon shows up and saves me from certain doom. A decision I'm sure he won't regret later on. I then run into a tower where I climb up some stairs and do this sick jump over a dragon as he kills a Stormcloak before making my mad dash through Helgen until I reach the keep itself, where I decide to escape with Hadvar because an Imperial soldier seems better trained than some random rebel. With that, I enter Helgen, get my bindings removed by Hadvar, and loot my first set of armor. I then start fighting, and oh boy, this was my first taste of just how difficult combat will be, but also just how fun it will be, as I was getting hyped every time I got an unarmed finisher. I start feeling like a WWE wrestler, and it's extremely fun. Overall, I have really low damage output, and something I didn't expect is how painful our attack range is. I'm missing punches that with any other melee weapon would be easy hits. I guess it shouldn't be too surprising considering Unarmed has the lowest attack range in the game, but I didn't expect it to be this much of an issue for me. I realized pretty quickly that to get attacks off, I just have to face tank the attacks of my enemies unless they're distracted. This makes me worried about any enemy using high damage melee weapons such as great swords and warhammers, as they will usually get the first hit, and in some cases that'll leave me very low on HP or just entirely dead. Anyways, I continue through the dungeon, and at one point I forget that I chose the Imperials over the Stormcloaks and end up fighting the wrong NPCs at some point, which wasn't good, but nevertheless, I made my way down through the dungeon of Helgen, and as we enter the last room with Stormcloaks, I get absolutely murdered. Trying again, I take things slower and focus on attacking distracted enemies, and through the clever tactic of using my claws and tanking their damage, I reign victorious over the Stormcloaks and continue on my way with Hadvar through the cave system attached to Helgen's dungeon. It's there where we encounter the only non-visual mod in the run called Insects Be Gone. It replaces all spiders with bears since I have arachnophobia, and I think this mod actually makes the game harder as the bears are significantly more tanky and damaging than the spiders would have been. I then spend an uncomfortable amount of time smacking the butts of bears until they get angry at me, forcing me to run away, and after about 10 to 15 minutes, me and Hadvar manage to fell the last invading bear, and then make our way onwards where we encounter a normal bear that I easily kill without issue before we exit the cave to start my journey into the big world of Skyrim. I start making my way to Riverwood, and along the way I have to kill some wolves, which got a bit hairy with me almost dying before even reaching the village, but eventually I do, and when I arrive I speak with the blacksmith who just so happens to be Hadvar's uncle. He gives me a bunch of supplies, and I decide that I should go ahead and see how difficult the combat is going to be now that I'm fighting alone. I make my way up the nearby mountain to test my mettle against the bandits of Bleak Falls Barrow. I end up killing another wolf before encountering my first group of bandits at a watchtower. The fighting is rough and I take a lot of damage, nearly dying, but by staying mobile and taking on the bandits one at a time, I managed to fell all 3 bandits while teetering on the brink of death. I then run back down the mountain to remove my cold debuff and restore my health before going back up the mountain, making my way to the entrance of Bleak Falls Barrow, where I am quickly bested by a bandit with a battle axe. I try again, this time making it a bit further, but end up taking down the first bandit only to die again to the other two bandits that use archery. They say third time's the charm, and in this case that's very much so true, as I managed to take down the first bandit without too much issue, and then follow it up by chasing down and killing the other two bandits with ease, even getting this awesome kill animation on the last one. I then run down the mountain once more to recover before entering Bleak Falls Barrow, where the fighting continues. Overall, our damage is really lackluster, as even these low-level bandits that are supposed to be easy to take out require me to hit them up to 9 times or more in some cases. I've been chugging health potions to get through these combat encounters, and I'm quickly running out as I take down the first two bandits inside Bleak Falls Barrow before taking a quick 7-hour nap to recover. I then watch a bandit named Steve die to an obvious puzzle before getting scared by some skeevers. Luckily though, I'm a Khajiit, which is the natural predator of skeevers, so I deal with them easily before encountering my hardest opponent yet. Normally this would be a wounded frostbite spider, but instead it's a wounded invading bear, and I start off by breaking the webs that lead into its room and run away to the staircase that had the skeevers. I attempt to fight the bear and quickly learn that its attacks kill me in one hit. This doesn't deter me immediately, but after dying many times, I decide that the only choice is to run away and leave this dungeon until I can come back later with better gear. Speaking of better gear, I think the best thing for us right now would be to get a good set of heavy armor, so I make my way to Whiterun, where I help fight a giant before insulting the companions and hiring a carriage to Solitude. I enter the city and, die because I accidentally interrupted an execution. My bad. After making my way back to the city, I head over to Castle Dower so I can join the Imperials, since I know I can get a good set of heavy armor once I join them. I start by speaking with General Tullius, who tells me to speak with Legate Rikke about joining the Imperial Army. I speak with her and she tells me to clear out a fort that is being occupied by some bandits nearby, and I respond by telling her the fort will be hers, before making my way out there only to find out after a lot of deaths that I cannot even remotely deal with the bandits here. Well, I'm just completely lost as to what I should do with how impossible every task so far has seemed to be. I very clearly need to get more damage, health, and armor. Seeing as my idea for getting better armor has been thwarted, my two options are to level up doing something to get health, or to go to the Rift and Ratways to try and obtain the Gloves of the Pugilist. I was trying to avoid going to the Ratways so early, as I know the enemies in there are really tough, but it feels like I don't really have a choice. So I make my way to Riften and enter the city to find a man named Brynjolf who proposes that I help him do some crime. This seems like a good idea, so I agree and steal a ring from a nearby Khajiit trader's stall before planting it on another trader without getting caught. After framing an innocent trader and getting him thrown in jail, I speak with Brynjolf again, who tells me to meet him later in a bar called the Ragged Flagon inside Riften's Ratways. I then make my way down to the Ratways and run past some bandits in order to make my way to the NPC named Gain the Fist. He has the armor piece known as the Gloves of the Pugilist that are enchanted to give 10 extra unarmed damage. I get destroyed by him on my first attempt, but decide that I can brute force this fight by luring him into the bear traps all over the floor and constantly running from him. I die a lot. He only needed to hit me a couple of times to trigger a kill animation, and I have to make him step on these traps over and over to kill him, but eventually I managed to perfectly lead him over all these traps multiple times in order to kill him and take his prized gloves. I then go into the Ragged Flagon and speak with Brynjolf, who tells me to go beat up some local business owners that aren't paying their dues to the Thieves Guild. On my way out of the Ratways, I manage to lure this lowlife to the bandits that I ran past earlier, and they start fighting each other. I take this opportunity to kill all of them as they are distracted before leaving the Ratways and making my way to the Argonian bar owner. I try and ask her nicely to pay her dues to the guild, but she declines. So instead, I start start a fist fight with her where I get absolutely demolished. Yeah, I don't think I can do this quest right now, and decide I'll come back later as I have with everything else in this run so far. So right now, I think I should be fighting some easier enemies, and I also want to get my smithing and enchanting levels higher, so logically, I head over to the Ember Shard mine near Riverwood, where I start fighting my way through the bandits inside. It was quite the dungeon for me, and I die a lot of times, so I'm just going to show you this death and carnage montage. While we watch my struggle, you should consider going down below and hitting the like button, and maybe even subscribing if you haven't already. Only 10% of you are subscribed, which means that 90% of you all may not be notified when I post a video. Oh, also, while you're looking at the buttons below the video, there's one that says join, and if you click it, you can get access to every video early, as well as things like polls and access to all the stream VODs where I stream these challenge runs for as little as $3 a month. Alright, I've made it through the dungeon, and along the way I managed to mine quite a bit of iron ore. This is going to be important here soon, as I'm going to use the ore to get a ton of levels, but it's not enough, and I also need a spell from another dungeon. But before I go delving into another dungeon, I decide to head to Whiterun, where I can use my fist fighting skills to earn some quick cash. I make my way to the local tavern and challenge a woman in heavy armor to a fist fight where we both bet 100 gold. I was curious if I would be able to beat her on my first try, and as it turns out, I could. She then becomes a follower, but I don't really need a follower, so instead I trade her and take all of her worldly goods so I can sell it before telling her to screw off. I then make my way up to Dragon's Reach, the castle here in Whiterun, and after speaking with the Jarl and court wizard for a while, I start using the enchanting table there to level enchanting before sleeping and using a level up to get more health and some perk points. I'm going to be using every level up in this run for more health, as I don't see any way for us to deal with damage other than having more health and having more armor, so this seems like the logical choice. I then leave Whiterun and make my way over to the Halted Stream Camp, which is a mine that contains the Transmute Ore spell. This spell will allow us to take all of the iron ore we have gotten and turn it into gold ore. I attempt to take on the bandits outside the mine, and it's a really difficult combat section. There's a woman casting ice magic who always pairs up with a Khajiit swordsman in order to kill me. I die over a dozen times attempting to deal with them, but eventually I do manage to kill off all 4 of the bandits outside and make my way inside the mine itself. Once there, I find that the combat didn't get any easier from the outside to the inside, and you guessed it, I die a few more times. I also managed to mine quite a bit of iron ore like I did in Ember Shard mine, and while I whittle down the bandits' numbers, I start thinking maybe I can clear this dungeon too. But after many deaths, I eventually realize I cannot kill the bandit chief, as he kills me in one hit every time. So I dash past him, grab the spellbook, and then book it out of the mine, and with that, I've learned the Transmute Ore spell. I then head back to Whiterun, where I spend a ton of time transmuting iron ore into silver ore and silver ore into gold ore. I also do some side quests in the city that involve making a couple of deliveries to the steward and potion shop before turning all of the gold ore into gold bars, which I use to make a ton of gold rings. I then go practice enchanting by disenchanting a few magic items, buying soul gems from Farengar, and enchanting rings over and over. I continue this cycle of going to a mine, making rings, and enchanting them until I have 40 enchanting and 3 levels in the first enchanting perk. It's here where I use the enchantment from the Gloves of the Pugilist to make a ring and gauntlets that each give me 8 more unarmed damage. All of this work has been to go from 10 extra unarmed damage to 16, but hopefully this small improvement will be worth it. I also leveled up a ton and got a bunch more health, and I think it's time to go back to some of those quests we left undone. I start by heading off to Riften, where I attempt the fistfights again, and this time things go a lot better. I still get absolutely curb stomped by the Argonian innkeeper, but I easily deal with the local general trader, beating him to a pulp until he pays his dues, and then I head over to the bunkhouse where I die to a Riften City guard before beating the money me out of the bunkhouse owner. I then go back to the Argonian innkeeper, ready to try and fight her again, but now all of a sudden she's scared of us and gives me the money she owes to the Thieves Guild. I then return to the Ratways and the Ragged Flagon, where I tell Brynjolf how it went, and he takes me to the cistern to speak with another Thieves Guild member named Mercer. Fun fact about Mercer, he has a much worse microphone than Brynjolf, so I can't hear him over the insanely loud water effect in this room.
Mercer, this is the one I was talking about. Our new recruit.
This better not be another waste of the guild's resources, Brynjolf.
Either way, they tell me that in order to finally join the Thieves Guild, I need to go burn down some beehives and steal from a safe at a local brewery. So I make my way out to the brewery in question, and after sneaking onto the island, I burn down 3 of the beehives with a torch before escaping the hostile mercenaries by swimming away. I then sneak my way into the manor, and after dying a bunch of times to these mercenaries inside, I find out that funnily enough, if you take off this huge, bulky, heavy metal armor, you're better at sneaking. Who would have guessed? I then sneak through the manor, and after another death, I walk up to this guy and pickpocket him mid-conversation, which had me laughing so hard as I then sneak out of the room and into the basement, where I yet again die a few more times, and then have this awesome escape sequence where I steal from the safe while running from 2 guards and duck into the sewers, where I continue to run from them until I lose them by exiting the sewers and swimming away from the island. I then return to Brynjolf and get inducted into the Thieves Guild, where I can get my armor from a rude lady who gets sassy with me before I have to go to the Riften Inn to speak with a rich lady who is also rude as hell. She then tells me to go sabotage one of her competitors, and I agree. I head off to Whiterun to speak with a sickly looking man inside the Bannered Mare Inn who tells me the plan. I'm supposed to poison the competing brewery's mead by using rat poison on the vat of alcohol. First, I have to deal with a ton of skeevers, and oh no. They kill me a bunch, and it quickly becomes apparent I can't progress through them. Well then, I guess the Khajiit is not the natural predator of the skeever, because these are incredibly tanky and strong and hit me so hard, and they also have a poison effect. It's just a whole cavalcade of issues that I can't even touch right now. I decide to return to Whiterun to regroup, and it's here where I realize I don't have any of the Creation Club content from the Anniversary Edition installed. So I quickly go download them and then proceed to craft a backpack, some camping supplies, and a pair of Brawler's gloves that should increase my melee damage. I also craft myself a shield to see if it will help with any of these difficult encounters, but I'm not allowing myself to bash with the shield at all. I try to take on the skeevers again, but it's just not working. They are too strong for me. I then change tact and decide to return to Bleak Falls Barrow to attempt that dungeon again. At first, things are going pretty well. The bandits have respawned, which is unfortunate, but I make my way through those outside and the first group inside before reaching this bandit outlaw who just destroys me. I die many times to him before realizing I'm just not able to deal enough damage to kill him before he kills me. It's here where I start to feel a little lost. I simply don't deal enough damage, and I start thinking that this run is impossible with the restrictions I've put on myself. Every encounter feels like a mountain that I have to climb, and I'm pretty sure I've died more in this run than I did in the Protectron run, and we haven't even started the main quest line. I'm well aware I could boost my damage greatly by using enchanting and alchemy to glitch out the damage enchantment on my gloves, but I feel like that's an exploit. I don't want to resort to that, as it would mean I've failed the run according to my own rules, so instead I'm going to do something else I was avoiding. I'm going to do the Companion's quest line to see if the werewolf form is able to make this run more doable. Technically, when in werewolf form, I'm still unarmed, but it does feel a little bit cheap to me. I don't feel this invalidates the run, but it definitely wasn't what I wanted when I originally planned the run either. Anyways, I make my way to the Companions, and after a ton of talking, I'm told to take this guy's sword to a nearby blacksmith. I do so, and then take a shield from the blacksmith to a companion woman who welcomes me. I then get taken by a companion named Farkas to my sleeping quarters, where I ask him for a job, and he tells me to go to the Halted Stream camp and kill the bandit leader there. This is the same Halted Stream camp where earlier I couldn't kill the bandit leader and he was one-shotting me. Well, I guess I have to find a way to kill him now, and maybe the extra levels I've picked up along the way will make it doable. I make my way over to the mine with the bandits, and after a few deaths and some trial and error, I managed to get it down to just me and the bandit leader. I honestly cannot do justice to just how insanely difficult this was. Here is a death montage of the dozens of times he killed me as I break down what I learned and how I had to approach the fight to win. So it took me a while, but I found out that I cannot let him hit me ever, as it will lead to my death by one of Skyrim's instant death animations. So instead, I had to find a way to hit him without him hitting me. This turned out to be a huge issue, as he was using a greatsword, which is one of the highest range melee weapons in the game, and I was using, well, the lowest range melee weapon in the game. So I died many times, learning that when he does his heavy attack, the one where he does an overhead slash, I can dodge it and hit him twice before he can recover and attack me again. From that point on, it was just a matter of never getting hit. Oh, also, it's at this point in the run where I decide to allow myself to use restoration spells to heal myself mid-combat, as the run is about how I deal damage and not about how I manage my health. I eventually managed to fight him perfectly, never allowing myself to fall low enough to be instant killed, and it was a joyous moment to finally kill this orc before returning to Farkas to complete the quest. I then speak with Skjor, who tells me that my final task to officially join the companions is to go with Farkas to some Draugr-infested ruins in order to find a missing piece of something called Wuthrad. I agree and head off to meet Farkas at the ruins, and once inside, the combat is, well, quite easy for once. It's a nice change of pace to be able to use an NPC as a meat shield, and we make good progress until we find some bars blocking our path forward. I pull a lever and get trapped inside this small room when suddenly Farkas is surrounded by a group of people called the Silver Hands. It's then revealed that Farkas is indeed a werewolf, as he transforms and murders all of the Silver Hand before releasing me, and after a short conversation where we gloss over the entire werewolf thing, I continue through the dungeon with him. It's a long and slow dungeon, and I do end up dying once or twice, but overall, the combat is slow and steady, and by using Farkas as a meat shield, I'm able to help out by punching enemies that are attacking him. Eventually, we reach a room with bears, and this funny glitch happens where one of the bears starts defying gravity, and then when it dies, it has the funniest expression. I laugh at it for a while, and then proclaim this bear to be none other than Derp Bear before taking a screenshot and continuing on to the last room with Farkas. And oh boy, this last room was a slog. I never end up dying, although I do get extremely close a few times, and I have to use Farkas as a meat shield and run around a lot as more and more Draugr keep spawning, but eventually we manage to deal with all the Draugr and start making our way back to Jorvaskr, where the other companions are waiting for our return. I then make my way to the courtyard, and Farkas vouches for me, which means I'm officially a member of the companions. I then speak with Vilkas, who tells me of a kidnapping in Whiterun that I need to help with, so I head out to this cave where I find the kidnappers, who happen to be vampires, and Hulda, the innkeeper from Whiterun, and I end up dying quite a few times before realizing that this is just impossible for me. I reload an earlier save and start trying a few of the other companion quests, as these are all Radiant quests and I just need to complete one to continue the companion story, so I try Aola the Huntress's next, and she wants me to kill a troll. Well, I try and fail to kill the troll, and instead of trying for an hour, I decide to check out the other quests first, and next up I speak with Farkas, and oh my god, Farkas is my hero and the true hero of the companions. All he wants me to do is rough up a guy in Riften. I head over to Riften and start the fist fight, but then this random Riften guard decided that I broke the law while trying to do the quest, so they kill me. I try again, and for some reason the Riften guard doesn't care this time, so I end up beating up this rich guy to settle the dispute, and then return to Farkas, who pays me and tells me to speak with Skjor, who tells me to meet him in the Underforge at night. I meet him there, and he says that I've earned the blessing of the beast blood. I drink some tasty werewolf juice, and then turn into one before sprinting out of Whiterun. I then find myself in a snowy forest with Aola, who tells me we are gonna go kill a bunch of those Silver Hand fellas from earlier. We enter the dungeon, and yeah, it's rough. I die over and over and over, and even with the ability to transform into a werewolf, the combat in this run is incredibly difficult. Despite this though, I eventually reach the end of the dungeon, and the boss here named Skinner basically one hit kills me every time. After many deaths, I eventually manage to clear out his allies as a werewolf, and then stun lock him with the knockdown effect of the werewolf's heavy attack until I kill him. We then learn that Skinner killed Skjor, and Aola and I are going on a revenge campaign. But before doing that, there's another side quest I want to do to make the werewolf form more powerful, so I head off to Falkreath and get thrown in jail for punching a guard. I then make my way out and speak with a man named Sinding, who tells me of a cursed ring from a Daedric prince named Hersign that he wants me to return to break the curse. I have to hunt down this great beast in order to speak with Hersign, so I do so, and when I speak with him, he tells me to go kill Sinding, and that there are other hunters trying to do just that. I agree and make my way out to the cave that he's hiding in, where I decide to double-cross Hersign and help Sinding instead. Together we destroy all of the hunters, and I then kill Sinding trying to get 2 Daedric artifacts at once, but it doesn't work because his dead body glitched out, so I can't interact with it. Oh well, I got what I wanted as I go outside and get the Blessed Ring of Hersign, which allows me to transform to a werewolf at will an infinite number of times a day, whereas normally I'd be restricted to only using beast form once a day. With that, I feel it's time to continue the Companion's quest, so I head out to the fort where Aola said I can find another fragment of Wuuthrad, and when I arrive I find some silver hands there, and it's honestly quite easy to deal with them. I then enter the fort to find the silver hand leader, and he isn't easy to deal with. He kills me in one hit with his dwarven warhammer, but I manage to stun lock him and bring him down after a couple of deaths. With that, I claim the fragment of Wuuthrad and return it to Aola. She then tells me to go sneak into a cave filled with bandits and Silver Hand members in order to steal the Silver Hand's plans. I agree, but before heading out there, I feel I need to upgrade my gear. I really want beast form to be more of a last resort that I only use when my normal gear and fists aren't up to the task, so I really need an upgrade from my set of steel armor to make myself more tanky. I make my way to Markarth, where I speak with the court wizard, Calculator Elmo, who tells me that I can enter his museum and the dwarven excavation site if I kill a spider named Nimma. I agree, but before I try and take on this task, I decide to try my luck at sneaking into the museum and stealing from the dwarven weapon and armor cases, as that's my plans for getting better armor. I try and get past the guards a few times, but I just don't have a high enough sneak level to steal from the museum with all the guards being hostile. So this leaves me with only one option, which is to kill Nimma. I make my way into the Dwemer ruins, and honestly, the fighting is rough, but not all that interesting. I have to use werewolf form since the bears just do too much damage and are incredibly tanky, and I die a few times to them, but eventually I fell Nimma and return to Calculator Elmo, who gives me access to the museum and excavation sites. I then go steal from the museum, only to realize it doesn't have the full dwarven armor set. This is only a minor setback though, as I head into town and find that the blacksmith sells dwarven gear. I buy some brawler gauntlets from her, and then go back to the museum to steal some dwarven scrap metal, which I then turn into a set of superior dwarven armor. With this, I'm about as tanky as I can expect to be at this stage of the game, so it's time to take on the bandits and silver hands that Aola told us about. I head over to the cave and start fighting my way through them, and just like every other combat encounter in this run so far, I struggle with it. I die a whole bunch of times as I slowly crawl my way through this dungeon. The upgrades to my armor and the gauntlets are noticeable though, and I'm able to deal with a vast majority of the enemies in the first section of the dungeon without using beast form. That all changes with the second section though, as the silver hands here have insane HP totals and hurt me a lot. Even in werewolf form, they are a handful, pun intended, and I have to stun lock them to avoid dying. In the end, I managed to slog through all of the bandits and silver hand members and steal their plans before sneaking out of the caves and returning to Aola. She tells me to speak with Kodlak, and he tells me that our revenge is going too far and that I need to go kill some witches that curse the companions with beast blood and bring back a head for him to break the curse. One thing I find weird about that is he's sending us alone, which I find really dumb just looking at it from his perspective. So to set the scene from Kodlak's perspective, you are desperate to no longer be a werewolf so you can go to Sovngarde instead of being in Hersine's hunting grounds. And instead of sending multiple of your best warriors, you send the newest member of the companions by themselves. Doesn't seem like he actually gives a damn about Sovngarde. Sure, his words make it seem that way, but talk is cheap, and this guy isn't willing to put all of his actions and orders into this goal. I know that this is just because they don't want to make the game too easy, but it still seems really weird and cheap to me. Either way, I figure how bad can it be, and decide to go take on the witches on my own, but before I do, I have a big milestone to achieve. I go speak with Farkas and pay him most of my gold in order to obtain level 30 in the heavy armor skill, which allows me to take the Fists of Steel perk in the heavy armor skill tree. This increases my unarmed damage based on which tier of heavy gauntlets I'm wearing. Alright, so it's time to steal a head from a witch. I make my way to the witch's cave and get murdered while barely making a dent in the witch's health bar. I try again, this time using beast form, only to die because a random bear decided to join in against me. I go at it for a third time, and this time manage to kill the witch and wait for beast form to wear off so I can steal her head. And I only have to kill one of them? Awesome, I was thinking I'd have to go through a whole cave of these. It's really nice to not have to worry about killing more of them because they do a ton of damage. I return to Jorvaskr and uh-oh, there's some silver hands dead here. Seems there was an attack while I was gone and Kodlak is dead. Well, I guess it's time for more revenge, just like Kodlak would have wanted, so Vilkas and I head off to wipe out the silver hands and retrieve the final fragments of Wuthrad. The combat here is pretty par for the course. I now have a system for combat encounters where I use my fists to kill a group of enemies and then heal afterwards. It's going well, and anytime I hit a major combat roadblock that kills me a few times, I start using beast form to handle these tougher encounters. I die a few times in this dungeon, but the combat is no longer feeling insurmountable, and I think that I should be able to get into actually progressing the story soon. This is by far the hardest run yet from a combat perspective, but as we grab the final fragments of Wuthrad and kill the last of the silver hands, I'm feeling pretty confident. I return to Whiterun and attend Kodlak's funeral before retrieving the final piece of Wuthrad from his room and giving it to Yorland, who tells me to meet the other companions in the Underforge. It's here where we decide we should try and find a way to get Kodlak into Sovngarde, and that's when Yorland enters the Underforge with the reforged Wuthrad, and we set off towards the tomb of Ysgramor. This dungeon is really frustrating. I know I'm able to get through it, but there's multiple times where I hit roadblocks. The ghosts in this area range from completely harmless pushovers to absolute units that can kill me with ease and take over a minute to kill even in beast form. Despite that, I do have some really funny moments during the live stream, which I want to share here, so here. Whoa, those bears are really loud. No, the bears just started screaming in the next room. They're like, oh, we exist. I hear you. Shut up. You're so loud.
I have a sword, you don't.
He is. He's flaunting his sword at me. Ha! Ha! You can't open doors. You can't open doors. Who's looking smart now? Huh? I'm gonna heal in front of you to assert dominance. Oh no! Let me know if you want me to mix in more of these livestream moments in the videos, and in case you didn't know, I livestream these challenges right here on this channel for free, and you can view all of the VODs by joining the channel membership program for as little as $3 a month. Eventually, after dying so many times, I managed to make it to the final room where we speak with Kodlak's ghost, who tells me to burn the witch's head. I do so, and then have to fight a ghost version of his beast form, and it was relatively easy since it attacked Aola and just let me wail on it until it dies. Then Kodlak says I'm now the leader of the companions, which is, interesting. Either way, I then speak with Aola and then Farkas to end off all of the companions' quests, and with that, I feel it's time to take on the main story. I head off to Bleak Falls Barrow to obtain the Dragonstone for Farengar, and I thought with all these levels and new armor I may be able to plow my way through here with no issues, but sadly the bandit outlaw from earlier is still just too strong for me. So I go into beast form and rip through him, and run through the rest of the dungeon with little to no issues. I alternate between using beast form and my normal fists, and overall it's actually quite fun to trek through this dungeon. I decided to use the beast form on the final boss since I assumed he would be too strong, and with that I grab the Dragonstone and deliver it to Farengar. I then get called to a meeting with a Jarl and his Huskarl who inform me I'm gonna go fight a dragon with the city guard. I head out towards the tower and then promptly hide inside and get a time lapse for you all. I know this may seem a little bit cheap, but honestly, I don't want to spend hours dying to this dragon since I know I'm gonna have to do that very soon anyways. This is one of the only free dragon fights in the game, so I'm gonna take that information and run with it. After the dragon dies, I absorb its soul juice like it's Kool-Aid before returning to the Jarl and finding out that the Greybeards have summoned me. Well, I don't want to keep them waiting, so I get on my horse and start riding up the 7,000 steps to meet them, ignoring all the enemies along the way, and when I arrive, I have some more hilarious moments on stream and I'll just play them right here. Give me your knowledge, Einhar, whatever your name is. Put the words on the ground so I can read them. I will beat the crap out of you, old man. Master Bori, could you please leave your mark on the floor and tell me how to use your little whoosh ability? Can you teach me to whoosh, Bori? I need to whoosh. It's my entire life's purpose. I must whoosh. I must whoosh like you, Bori. Please. Bori, that's not enough. I need you to give me your knowledge of whoosh. Yes, I grow whooshly powerful.
Willow whoosh addiction is real.
Whoosh.
Whoosh.
Oh, dude, you don't even need to give me a demonstration, bro. Dude, I got this. I was born to whoosh.
Whoosh.
I whoosh so good. Are you proud of me, Wolfgar? Are you proud of me? You and your beautiful blue eyes and your luscious beard. Do you like me, Wolfgar? Alright, so we learned how to whoosh really good and got told to go dungeon crawling for some fancy horn. I meander my way over to the dungeon and at first I'm confident. The first room goes incredibly well and I'm feeling good about my combat abilities, only for the next room to absolutely destroy me as I die another dozen times. This run is just really crushing my soul. Either way, I continue through the dungeon, each fight alternating between laughably easy and incredibly difficult until I reach this room with a bunch of bears. Or, well, they're supposed to be spiders, but they're bears because of the Insects Be Gone mod, which I'm really regretting at this point because it makes these spider sections way worse. The bears are incredibly tanky and deal so much damage, and I genuinely think they are harder than spiders since the spiders wouldn't have as much health. Either way, this room was a struggle, but eventually I managed to avoid both the fire traps on the ground and kill all the bears in order to claim my prize, which happens to be a note in place of the horn I came here for. It tells me to rent the attic room in the Riverwood Inn, so I head over there and try to do so, only for a woman named Delphine to interrogate me before taking me into her super secret hidden room to ask me to fight a dragon with her to prove that dragons are being revived and that I'm a dragonborn. We head out to a dragon burial site and I start wailing on this dragon before he even has his skin and scales because I don't respect this dragon and the fight starts off really well. I manage to lower his HP to below 10%, but he kills me right before I can kill him. The next attempt goes swimmingly. I continue to punch this overgrown lizard repeatedly, slowly chipping away at his health, and in the end, I embarrass this so-called mighty fire-breathing beast by literally punching it to death like it was some kind of bar fight. As I stand victorious over his corpse, Delphine tells me to meet her at the Riverwood Inn again, so she can tell me the next step of the plan. I do just that, and she tells me to go to Solitude and give my gear to an elf in a bar because he can smuggle it into a big party for me. I do so before speaking with her outside of Solitude, where she takes everything I didn't give to the elf and gives me some snazzy clothes. I then get on a carriage in my fancy clothes so that I can go infiltrate a Thalmor party and find out what they know of the dragon's return to Skyrim. I look so good, and I ride to the party, and when I arrive, I enter and speak with this rich Thalmor woman before she gets distracted. I then go speak with the elf from the bar earlier, and he tells me to create a distraction. I do so by making a rich partygoer harass a barmaid, and in all of the commotion, I manage to slip into the staff area with the elf, who takes me to a chest with all my gear. I get suited up and start taking on the Thalmor inside, and it's quite honestly a very difficult section. The soldiers are well equipped and take me down easily, and the magic from their wizards is just overwhelming. I end up having to use beast form to brute force my way through the dungeon, and even with that, I die a ton of times. Beast form is really strong, but it has one huge weakness in the form of animation time. The only way to heal is by feeding, which is a long animation. Simply changing into beast form is an extremely long animation. It causes a lot of pain, but eventually, after many deaths, I find out that the Thalmor know very little of the dragons and are looking for an old dude named Esbern before I escape the party. I then go to the Riverwood Inn, where I tell Delphine what I learned, and she tells me to go get Esbern. I then head to the Rift and Ratways, and the Thieves Guild bartender tells me that Esbern is in the Ratway Warren. I make my way to him, dying once or twice along the way to some Thalmor, before I speak with him through a door and wait for him to unlock a comical number of locks. He then talks for a long time, and then we leave the Ratways, fighting through some more Thalmor along the way, and by using him as a meat shield, I'm able to avoid using beast form and just punch all of the Thalmor to death. Once we leave Riften, I take him to the Riverwood Inn, where I craft potions while he talks to Delphine, and we all decide that we must go to an old Blade's hideout to find Alduin's Wall, a prophetic wall about Alduin that should give us an idea of how to defeat him. I then head off and do some smithing in a vain hope to get high enough overall. I then head off and do some smithing in a vain hope that I can get a high enough overall level for merchants to sell orcish armor before making my way into a cave infested with Forsworn along with Delphine and Esbern. I end up dying on my first attempt to these two Forsworn, but on the second attempt I take it slower and we rise victorious before doing a couple of really simple puzzles and cutting our hand to open a face door that leads to Alduin's Wall. Inside the hideout, I find some Blade's armor that, when upgraded, should be much better than the Dwarven armor we are currently using, and oh god, does the Blade's armor look bad on the Khajiit. Well then, not playing in third person anymore. Oh, also, Esbern and Delphine get stuck for such a long time standing here, not continuing their dialogue, until eventually Esbern decides to monologue about the wall for an eternity. I then speak with Delphine, and it's decided I must go speak with the Greybeards, so I head out to Riften and use the forge there to upgrade my equipment, before making my way over to High Hrothgar, where I speak with Arngeir? I don't know how to say his name. I usually just say the Greybeard dude, but I was trying to say his name. You know what? We're just gonna leave it at that. He takes the horn from me and congratulates me on getting it, and then scolds me for working with the blades before getting verbally assaulted by another Greybeard. This convinces him to help me, and he says I must speak with Party Snacks, a dragon on top of the mountain who can help me learn a shout to defeat Alduin. We then go outside and he teaches me the Clear Skies shout, as it's the only way to get past the mist of the mountain without dying. I then proceed to die to the mist on the mountain because I'm incompetent before doing it correctly and making my way up to Party Snacks, who tells me that I must use an Elder Scroll to go back in time and learn a shout that stops dragons from flying. I ask him if they have an Elder Scrolls down at the Super Duper Mart, and he says no, and to go talk to someone who may know where one is. I speak to the Greybeard guy with a hard name to say, who tells me to go to the Mages College. I leave the mountain, and my horse dies to a fall that I didn't record. I know I need a horse for this next bit of the quest line, so I head out to Whiterun and tame a wild one. It takes a while, but eventually I tame this red horse and take it back to the stable, where I find out its name is Vor, which is very unfortunate. Either way, I ride a carriage to Winterhold and speak with the lady at the entrance to the college, and she allows me to enter the college after I prove I'm a Dragonborn. I then speak with the Orc Librarian, and he gives me some books about Elder Scrolls. I notice that one of the books is complete gibberish, and he tells me of a former mage at the college who went insane and is holed up in some excavation site up north. With that, I ride my people-eating horse up north to the excavation site and speak with the crazy man who tells me that I have to go through what is easily the hardest mandatory dungeon in the game in order to get an Elder Scroll. So I ride my Vor pony all the way to the Afland Glacial Ruins, and this ride is the reason I needed a horse. Even with the horse, which is much faster than running, I nearly die to the cold mechanic in Skyrim. I wait inside the dungeon for my cold debuff to go away before delving into what is normally the hardest dungeon in the main storyline. And par for the course on this run, I do okay dealing with the first two enemies, which are dwarven spiders, by killing them without issue. I then die to the third dwarven spider because I am just so weak. I then proceed to struggle my way through the entire dungeon. The dwarven spheres here are extremely difficult to deal with, forcing me to use beast form on them, but eventually I do find something that helps me out throughout the dungeon. I find by moving in a very specific way, I'm able to avoid getting hit by the the dwarven spiders while I punch them to death. This is really nice because it avoids me having to spend time healing up after every small encounter. After a lot of pain and struggling, I make it past the dwarven robots and enter the fresh hell that is the Falmer. I die so very many times, and it's quickly apparent I have to just run past them as I have little to no chance of fighting through them. I eventually get caught in this death loop after going through a door where I die over and over and over, but I'm a stubborn person and know that if I can just get to the dwarven centurion in this upcoming room, I can get past this section. Eventually, I manage to run past all of them using Beast Form's sprint and pull this lever before running past the centurion, which the Falmer kill before forgetting I exist, so they just screw off and I'm able to go loot the centurion to get the key and then run through this gate and down a set of stairs into the caverns below. I then go into Beast Form again and sprint across the caves until I reach a tower that leads to a giant machine puzzle, and after smacking some buttons for a while, I get to go down and grab the Elder Scroll. I'm now able to take on Alduin with party snacks on top of High Hrothgar, so I make my way up the 7,000 steps for the umpteenth time, and oh my god, do I hate that survival disables fast travel. In Fallout 4, there's vertibirds that can make life significantly easier, but in Skyrim, you have to go up to the Greybeard so many times, and the fastest way to do so is to fast travel to Riften and then ride a horse all the way up. It's incredibly slow and an absolute drag, and in future Skyrim runs, I'm going to just get a mod that enables fast travel, as this suffering doesn't add to the video at all, and it's just a hassle. With my rant over, I set up a cheese tactic for the Alduin fight. The Creation Club adds a camping set. You can create camps that have a fire which warms you up. I place one down on top of the mountain right before opening the Elder Scroll, so I don't have to worry about freezing to death in the Alduin fight like I did in my last run. I open the Elder Scroll and watch a short film about how these heroes of old used the Dragon Rin shout to force Alduin to land, and then used the Elder Scroll to banish him to the future. When I leave the vision, Alduin is here on the mountain monologuing. I use the Dragon Rin shout on him only to die damn near instantly to it. This fight was absolutely brutal. I die over 30 times, so you know what? Here's a death montage. And if you enjoy my pain and suffering in these runs, you should consider subscribing to the channel and liking this video. Alright, one death montage later, and we can go ahead and break down this fight. So it became quickly apparent I cannot tank much, if any, of Alduin's attacks, so I have to time my Dragon Rin perfectly to make sure that Party Snacks and Alduin are always landed near each other. As they have an angry conversation, I start punching Alduin's wing repeatedly. It took a long time, and I kept having to quick save to make it manageable, but eventually I lower his HP to just a sliver, and after running to my campfire again and healing up, I use the Clear Sky shouts to remove his meteors, which, in case you didn't know, that is a thing, and then I switch to Beast Form to run over and beat the crap out of him, finally felling the World Eater. I then find out that I need to go to Sovngarde in order to fully kill Alduin so that he doesn't end the world. To do so, I need to trap a dragon in Whiterun, so I go speak with the Jarl and he says I need to get the Imperials and Stormcloaks to agree to a truce. I then speak with the Greybeards after climbing the 7,000 steps again, and they tell me they will hold the peace talks and to go speak with Ulfric and Tullius. I start with Ulfric and he's easy to convince with a speech check before making my way to Tullius, who will not speak with me until I complete the quest to join the Legion from so long ago. I angrily make my way back to the fort, and like everything else in this run, it involved me dying for a while until I eventually clear it. This run has been brutal, but finally I'm able to speak with Tullius, who agrees to come to the talks. I then sit through the longest conversation in the game and finally get the Imperials and Stormcloaks to agree to a truce while I, save the world. And with that, it's time to capture a dragon in Whiterun. I make my way there and speak with the Jarl, who says we are good to go. I then use a shout to summon a dragon, and after using Dragon Rind on him, I manage to lure him into the trap and capture him. I then speak with him, and he agrees to take me to Skuldafn, where I can find a portal to reach Sovngarde. I ride off on the dragon's wings, and immediately upon landing in Skuldafn, I go into beast form and run past all of the enemies outside so I can enter this dungeon filled with draugrs and bears. I've already described fighting through dungeons like this so many times in this run, so I'll just say we die a bunch of times, but in the end make it through the dungeon and use beast form once outside to sprint into the portal to Sovngarde before it gets closed. I then start traversing the mist of Sovngarde and run into Alduin and Kodlak before meeting a man guarding a bone bridge to the Hall of Heroes or something like that. He says I need to best him in combat in order to enter the hall, so I challenge him and die immediately. Well, this would suck if I can't beat him and have to go back to an earlier save, but I try again, and this time I easily beat him with the funniest kill in the run as I yeet him off the bridge into the chasm below with Beast Form's ragdoll effect. With that, I enter the hall and speak to the heroes of old who fought Alduin in the Elder Scroll vision, and they agree to help me fight him again. I run outside with them, and after a relatively anticlimactic fight where I just used Dragon Rend and Clear Skies while punching Alduin, we manage to kill the World Eater for good and get shouted back to Skyrim, where I drop the cheese I've been gathering throughout this run and take a seat to admire it while answering the question, can I beat Skyrim Legendary Survival difficulty with only unarmed damage? Yes I can, but I have to be a werewolf. Thank you so much for watching, and if you enjoyed, please consider liking, subscribing, and commenting a new challenge suggestion. I'd like to thank my Patreons and channel members as their support has been tremendous, and if you like this video, you should check out my last Skyrim challenge run with only summons. You all are beautiful, and this is Willow, signing off.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in their cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me